Hello, this is Kåre Nielsen from Barral Institute Denmark. I have here with me Alain Croibier, and I just want to say a little bit about myself. I am a Barral Institute teacher, and I have the institute in Denmark, but I have an opportunity to speak to Alain a little bit about himself and also about his new class with Pediatrics Growth Forces. So Alain here that is with me has a long-term engagement with the Barral Institute, has a lot of experience as an osteopath, as an athlete teacher. And I have been with Alain many times as a student and also as an assistant. So I highly admire his diligence and ability to teach. Alain, what made you become an osteopath?
Okay, so the story is a little long, but in a fairly conventional way for the time, I initially worked as a physiotherapist in a big rehabilitation center, and I quickly became a little bit disillusioned with my work. I felt like I was following some formulas, some recipes, without having any real answers to certain fundamental questions I had. For instance, when I administered the treatment, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But in both cases, I didn't really understand why. So I wanted to find something else.
So that was the incentive for you to look for osteopathy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So can you tell me who has been the inspiration for you as an osteopath? Who did you look to say, okay, I've done my education through osteopathy, and this is the person, or these are the people that I have been inspired by?
As far as I can remember, the first osteopath I met was named Michel Berger-Perrin. He treated me when I was 20 after I got a cervical injury when I was in the physiotherapy school. I kept him as a therapist and as a friend for a few years, but unfortunately, he died suddenly at the age of 38 from a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. So it was more than 45 years ago, and I found myself a bit orphaned, deprived of my usual therapist.
Yeah.
And at that time, a colleague with whom I was working at the rehabilitation center told me, you should go to see a young osteopath. His name is Jean-Pierre Barral. And I went to see him. And initially, I met Jean-Pierre as a patient. And progressively, we became friends and then colleagues. And he was some inspiration of my career.
I have witnessed that, Alain. I have seen Jean-Pierre's early books and also met him first. But I also saw the way that you joined together to create things. So I've seen numerous books and courses created from you both. So I've been very thankful to follow that development of you. How has your development then been as an osteopath through the years?
Uh, because of my personal experience with osteopathy and its results over me, when I realized that physiotherapy was not meeting my expectations, naturally I thought about training in osteopathy. And then I asked to Jean-Pierre, what do you advise me? Although he was teaching in England at that time, he told me you should go to a French osteopathic school in Lyon called AT Steel Academy. They provide a good education and they have a good reputation. So it was also closer to my house than Maidstone. and it was easier to combine with my family life. So I completed there a 6-year part-time course at the school in Lyon, and after I graduated.
And then after graduation, then you started to work as an osteopath in your hometown,
Yes,
Principe?
totally. I gave up rapidly with my practice of physiotherapy, and since 1989, I'm working as an osteopath.
And then for a number of years, you just worked as an osteopath, or did you start going into being an instructor at some point?
Yes, I started to teach at the osteopathic school where I learned. And after, with Jean-Pierre, we wrote a book. And then I started to teach with him in the US, and then so on.
So did you go from immediately from finishing your studies to start to teaching at the academy?
No, not really. I started first to being an assistant, and after a few years, I began teaching as a teacher, as an instructor.
Okay. So what does it mean to you to be an instructor, to teach others?
Uh, it's a tricky question. For me, mostly being an instructor means trying to share a passion and the practice with other colleagues. It, I would say that it's also, and it's my hope, a way to make my colleagues save their time to improve their skill. And of course, ultimately, this is for the benefits of their patients, because it's a long process to, to, to pass from the practice to the teaching. And you cannot transfer your experience, but you can help others to move forward.
Tell me a little bit about the passion that you mentioned. What is the passion for?
For me, I feel like a craftsman. So there's a notion of engagement in my job. It's not only a profession, there's a kind of engagement, there's a manual culture, and it's difficult to transmit solely with PowerPoints and images. You must also transmit something else.
I totally agree. So there's at some point the Barral Institute started with, of course, Jean-Pierre Barral as the name of the institute. And I think that you were from the beginning. Can you explain a little bit what it means to you to be part of the Barral Institute?
As you mentioned, in Barral Institute, there's the word Barral.
Yep.
And being a part of BI for me is first and foremost a matter of loyalty in friendship. Jean-Pierre is my friend. We have worked extensively on various themes throughout our 45 years of friendship and collaboration. And some therapeutic approaches have emerged from this work. And for me, it's natural to be a part of this educational structure. So it's my family, and I feel that my place is with him.
I surely appreciate to be part of that family. So which concepts then and books and classes and then have you then been part of or solely developed? I know, I'm sorry, it's probably a big catalog, but can you a little bit an overview?
Yes, but rapidly with Jean-Pierre, we worked first on the after effects of the trauma, and This led us gradually to neural manipulations. We worked on peripheral nerve manipulations, then on cranial nerve manipulations. After, we worked on the vascular manipulations. And following that, we developed also an integrative approach of joints and on the upper and the lower extremities, spine and pelvis, and intervertebral discs. For my part, I worked more independently on the concept and practice of osteopathic diagnosis. I also worked as an independent researcher on an integrative conception of the human biomechanics and mechanics at the French Academy of Osteopathy. And I also developed some advanced techniques for the viscera of the neck and thorax. In parallel, I also went to the university to study the systemic approach to health, clinical research methodology, and a part of human sciences. And I worked in parallel all along my career on the various laws and principles governing growth. That's why the reason of the course that I propose.
Good. So how is your own approach then to pediatric work evolved over the years from being a student to being assistant to being, and now I would say, an expert?
My experience with osteopathic pediatrics after I began to work in 1989. At that time in France, we were illegal in France. So it was necessary to be technically cautious and effective. So in this context, there was an increasing demand for pediatric osteopathic consultations, and I felt the need of the postgraduate training in pediatrics. So I studied with Raymond Solano, who was the first person to write a book in French about pediatric osteopathy. And after, I also trained twice with the Dr. Viola Freiman. Both allowed me to start with a solid foundation in pediatrics. At the same time, in Grenoble, under Jean-Pierre's leadership, osteopaths had created an association offering free consultations for disabled kids. And 4 practitioners met in a dispensary. We took turns every Wednesday to treat the children. And this organization allowed us to work together, to exchange ideas, to share experiences, and to progress collectively. Later, we expanded the system to include the socially disadvantaged children, and the dispensary is still operating today. Myself, all along this experience, I realized that the pediatric practice was something very serious, not tolerating mediocrity. No other action that we take has such far-reaching potential consequences. The quality of an individual wrong when they are a child. So what puzzled me the most in my career were my failures. Sometimes, despite what I considered to be a well-managed treatment, certain plagiocephaly cases would worsen, or some symptoms would only regress temporarily. And this saddened me greatly. That's why I tried to understand why this sometimes happened. That's how I started to work on growth forces, just to try to detect what wasn't working with my treatments. I worked for myself.
So you try to develop ideas and finding way to understand a little bit better, and this is why you came into the growth force thought process. So tell us a little bit
Exactly.
about where does that idea come from with the growth forces?
It happened by chance because I was at the university library in Grenoble, and on a shelf I found a book written to professors forces and about the growth, pathological and physiological growth of the craniofacial area. And I took this book, I read it, and after having finished this book, I said, I thought I was well instructed in the cranial stuff.
Yeah.
I'm doing pediatric, but I don't know a single word of what is in this book.
Mm.
That's why I started to study it, but I repeat, it was only for myself. It was for my personal culture. And all along those 35 years, I collected patiently articles, books, and so on, just to improve my culture and to expand my culture about the growth.
Is there a particular clinical experience, maybe in a pediatric case that you can share that changed your way of thinking about treatment?
Uh, all along this process, of course, I experiment different techniques, but I remember the turning point. And despite repeated conventional cranial treatments, he was worsening. He was almost 6 or 7 months old, and I was beginning to despair of finding a solution for him. At the same time, I was already working on the growth forces, and on the other hand, working on the cranial nerve manipulations. So on this baby, without much hope, I confess, I tried to manipulate some of his cranial nerve ending to see what would happen. And to my big surprise, 3 weeks later, at the next appointment, the cranial index measurements showed that not only had there been no worsening, but things were actually improving. So that was the turning point that motivated me to persevere in this direction.
Wow. So the pediatric class with the growth forces that you created, what is the content? What would we expect to see in these classes?
This course primarily aimed to help you to understand how the skull grows and how you can manually intervene to support it. Cranial osteopathy, what I detected through my career is that very often the effect and the actual causes are often confused. The driving forces of growth are not located where we generally believe. And this leads to misinterpretation and misconceptions. For example, a very simple example, ossification and growth are often confused, even though they are two different phenomena of growth and the mechanisms that produce it are often counterintuitive, and there's a lot of optical illusion in the osteopathic world. So the cranial growth also follows a temporal and spatial progression. Some areas require to be treated in priority, while others allow more time to intervene. So there's a kind of schedule of growth, and it's very useful to know it to manage your treatment.
Okay, so I understand that you have set this program up so that it's 2 classes and also within a theoretical day before each of the 2 3-day classes. Why did you want to bring it into a full program like this rather than a class?
Skull growth is very complex. There are multiple interactions between genetics, epigenetics, and environmental conditions, mechanics, for instance. Cranial growth is an inseparable whole, but it comprises 2 main subunits, neurocranium and viscerocranium. So it takes time to understand and to learn the gentle, precise, and effective techniques I teach for each subunit. So the format of 2 separate but complementary seminars is the best formula I've found for this purpose. It takes time to integrate these different dimensions into our treatments and to master them. I could also add, it takes time to provide parents with effective guidance, because sometimes we hear some heresias from therapists who don't know what they say, but they like to speak, so they give parents advices that are not really relevant.
Mm.
And honestly, it took me and the cranial growth. So I'm trying to summarize the path I've traveled in 2 seminars of 3.5 days each, called the PFGA and PGFB. I think it's not bad, right?
It sounds very good. I'm very excited to see what it contains and how you're going to progress through the helping my understanding also with the pediatrics. Is there a particular part of the PGA that you find most excited and you want to share with the students?
There is no sensational information in this course. There's no information more sensational than any other. But what's often more rewarding for me as a teacher is shedding a new light on cranial pediatric practice and to see the reactions of attendees. It's always great to observe that experienced professionals who have generally a solid foundation in cranial osteopathy discover that they were missing certain dimensions and discover that these gaps can explain many failures in their pediatric practice. To answer your question, what excites me the most is sharing tools to avoid failures in pediatric fields. For the children's sake, of course, naturally, and not because of the therapist's narcissism, nor for my own narcissism, neither.
Yeah. So that goes to the next question, maybe. So what challenges do osteopaths actually come into face when they're working with the pediatrics? And how do you think then that these classes will help them to address those?
I've thought of this notion of challenge in pediatrics, and for me, uh, the two main challenges in pediatrics, especially with babies, are time management and efficiency.
Mhm.
There's a kind of paradox in pediatrics. You have to work quickly because children don't tolerate long sessions, but you also have to get lasting results because you have the responsibility when you take in charge a baby or a child. And this course provides a diagnostic and therapeutic methodology that allows you to be fast, gentle, and very effective with children at any age. And this is obtained by reharmonizing their own growth forces.
Wow, that sounds very good for me. Uh, as an experienced practitioner having treated a lot of babies, I look forward to this new dimension and to seeing
Just,
how to
just, to,
help your practice.
just to finish, I received a letter from a colleague who wrote me a few months after taking this training. And I just read you, I quote what he wrote me. Dear Alain, blah, 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 thanks to you, I've stopped tinkering with children's skulls, hoping that Mother Nature will do the rest. Now I know where, when, how, and why I'm working on a skull to restore its growth physiology. What better summary of the benefits could I say?
Perfect. That's a great review for you. Thank you very much, Alain, for your time to explain a little
You're
bit about
welcome.
these classes. I look forward, and I'm sure a lot of others will look forward to seeing you teach them.
I hope so.